Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Holly Fiorello, Director of Marketing for CallPotential. With me, I have Phil Murphy, the CEO and founder of CallPotential. Phil, would you share a little bit about yourself in case there's anyone here who doesn't already know you?
Sure. For those that don't know me, Phil, like Holly said, the founder of CallPotential, also an owner operator in the storage side. I've got 19 stores under the next door storage brand. So got a little bit of a perspective, not only on the technology side from CallPotential, but also the owner operator side. So like to kind of do, many of these webinars to share not only kind of the experience on the storage side, but also what we're seeing across a lot of these different locations across the last year.
Wonderful. So today's topic is the 2021 numbers in review, self-storage communication data, trends, and more. Phil, you want to tell us a little bit about what data we're going to be looking at today?
Yeah, so really what we wanted to do was look back at, data that's come in across the last 3 years. Obviously 2019 was kind of our last normal year. 2020, hit the pandemic and we saw a lot of kind of fluctuations. And then in 2021, we've really been looking at it going, okay, well, how much was replicated from 2020? How much continued? And so a lot of the data we're going to be looking at is not only the 2021 numbers that we're seeing, but we've also really broken it down and said, okay, let's look at Q4 of 2021 and compare that to 2020 and to 2019 and seeing, how much was kind of a temporary bump in 20, how much was it continued in 21, and then also talking a little bit about what we expect to see in 22 as things kind of continue to kind of establish the new world order that we seem to be in now.
I don't know about you, but to me, it's very strange that it's 2022. It's just 2021 felt like a continuation of 2020.
I still sign everything with 2021 on it. So as far as I'm concerned, I guess we haven't moved over yet, but I don't know why I'm trying to hold on to 21.
Me either. I don't know. I'm right there with you. Okay, so the first numbers that we're going to look at are inbound calls to CallPotential in 2021. And right off the bat, huge year, huge number. We processed over 19 million calls for the full year. Just looking at this chart, these are our Q4 numbers. Do you want to talk about them a little bit, Phil?
Yeah, so just talking a little bit about here, just to kind of give you a little lay of the land for those that are watching. Up on the right, the 19 million, that's really just kind of a total number that have processed. So it's kind of a nice little number to look at. However, really the main thing we're going to be talking about is the chart to the left and then the percentage changes you'll see in there. So you'll notice if you look over here, you're like, well, 1.5, that doesn't translate to 19 million for the year. What this is this is Q4 same store. So what we did is we took a grouping of stores that have gone across, 2019, 2020, 2021, and we looked to see how have those numbers changed. So that way we can see, not just, hey, this was impacted because we had more stores, but how did we see kind of growth in there? And so you'll see not only the chart, but then you'll also see kind of those percentages up and down that are in there. So kind of understanding the chart, but then as far as the numbers, yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of calls coming through, a lot of the things that we saw in 2019. It was interesting looking at this because, 2019 we saw, 2021, we saw a good sized jump, 6.5% in terms of overall change. And then from there, the interesting thing is a lot of that was really kind of calls coming in where people were moving from going in store. They were moving towards other methods of reaching out, whether that was website, whether it was phone. And so we saw a good sized jump there. What we saw in 2020 to 2021 was a continuation of that. That jump ended up maintaining into 21. What we saw was overall, and I think our 19 to 20 number, we'll have to get that in there, but about a 19% inbound jump from 2019 to 2021, and that ended up maintaining throughout. So that was a good size experience. So what that really means is we've seen, even though things have opened up, even though things are better and people have started to kind of return to whatever the new normal is, the phone and interaction is continuing to be strong. And really seen a lot more move from in-store to both online and phone, with a lot of that moving into phone as well.
I would say that's like one of the bigger upsets for me when I was looking at these numbers, is how we kind of thought that the phone was a little bit more of a, not necessarily dying media, but it wasn't going to be as prevalent as some other digital means. For it to be the continuation of it being that high, even though things are still open, is that because people are just used to making the calls now over the last year? Is it hiring challenges? Like, why do you think that number is still so high?
I think it's really because people are going to do business in the way they prefer. So, at the end of the day, you're going to have a lot of those in-store visits. They're not going to necessarily move to online. They're going to move to phone. You're going to have phone. Some people will move to online, and you're going to have people kind of moving around to different places. You're going to have those people who go back to in-store. But at the end of the day, it comes down to how and when do I want to interact with the companies that I'm working with? And a lot of people are continuing to choose voice. Now, the one thing we didn't really look at was like, oh, are the same people calling? Because we don't really have a lot of kind of the same people that were tenants in 2019. I mean, obviously, we'd love for them to still be our tenants in Q4 of 2021, but the length of stay doesn't normally equal out to that. But it has been something where people continue on. They still want that interaction, even though that personal customer service, they might want the ease of use of processing a payment, but when it comes to making that purchase decision, when it comes to just kind of finding out the specifics, there's still nothing replacing that human contact, even though it's a little bit more remote than it may have been in 2019.
Good point. And if you have any of our attendees have anything you'd like to add, if you're seeing the same things, by all means, please drop it in chat. Okay, our next metric that we want to take a look at is how our leads entered changed from each Q4 quarter of those 3 years.
Yeah, this was interesting because we saw a big jump in leads from 19 to 20. And the interesting thing was as those leads jumped up, 23% change. And there now a lot of that was, keep in mind, this is Q4 of 2021. And so what ended up, Q4 between each of these years. And so what we saw in 2020 was there was a lot of that kind of pent up demand in the second quarter of 2020 that really kind of sat around. If people remember, in the April to July timeframe, there wasn't a lot of demand driver. There was kind of one of those, we maintained occupancy because people weren't moving out, but they were staying home. All of a sudden, when we got into Q3 and Q4, we saw people it was kind of a delayed rental season. And so the interesting thing was, as we came into 2021, figuring out, okay, do we continue to see that? Are we going to see kind of a return to normal in those 2019 numbers? However, what we saw was another 4% increase. Now, there's a couple of things that I've seen that have come across that what we've looked at is we've seen, okay, are we seeing similar kind of phone numbers and contact information spread across different locations? And what we're seeing is we're seeing more shopping that's taking place, especially in Q4, because I think as probably many of the people on the webinar have seen, our occupancy numbers have gone up significantly, especially at the second half of 21. And that increase in occupancy meant our customers are having to go out, our prospects are having to go out and do more shopping. And so what we found is the average number of stores that people are going out to, the number of people that they're talking to is increased. And so therefore, you're seeing a higher lead volume, you're seeing more coming in. What we're going to see later on in rentals is the rentals didn't necessarily change, but the amount of leads that fed those rentals did change. And so that shopping and everything else is really kind of what we're seeing really across the board with a lot of stores.
Interesting. You touched on rentals a little bit, so I thought that we would pull this next one up. How does this kind of correlate to what you were just saying with the leads?
Yeah, this was kind of interesting too. The leads, the rentals from 19 to 20. Remember, we basically had a compressed rental season in 2020. So that really saw kind of record rentals for many operators in 2020. The difference to that was, did we really expect that to maintain in 21? And so it was one where everybody's kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. But as we've seen, without the new supply coming on, just at the SSA workshop in Big Sky last couple of weeks ago, And what we're seeing, not only with the record occupancies, but with the compressed starts. Last year in 2021, there were 400 new facilities that went online, according to Chris Sony, who would kind of talk through a lot of what he'd seen in the market. He's expecting a very similar thing in 22. He was estimating about a similar number of starts in 22 to 21. And so with the limited supply, with the kind of increased rental rates that we're seeing, it was one of those things where, to be honest, if you would have asked me at the beginning of 21 where I expected it to end up, I wouldn't have told you it would have ended anywhere nearly as strongly as it did. But just to be able to see kind of that rental rate maintain, a 2% drop overall in terms of rental volume is actually pretty good, considering a lot of people are seeing in that 90, 95, 97% occupancy rates. There's just not the inventory to rent. And so hence the high leads, hence the flat-ish rentals across the board there. And really kind of how does that translate in?
Anecdotally, I've heard that the housing market is cooling off. Do you think that there's going to be a correlation with the rentals and storage as well? Is it that strong?
The housing market, it's interesting, there's a lot of talk of it cooling off, and a lot of that is kind of the increased cost of construction, but we're seeing a lot of planned unit developments. We're seeing a lot of new construction going on, even with the high cost of materials. It's still taking place and people are still going out and buying homes. So, we've seen some adjustment in there. I'm not sure how much of it's seasonality. To be honest, I'm not the biggest expert in the living space. However, it'll be one of those things where, as there's new construction, as people are continuing to move in, are people going to be moving into bigger homes? Are they staying in the same size housing that they're in now? But really, despite the market, because that was one of the big telling signs with storage is from 19 to 20 to 21, it was kind of the self-storage industry proving once again it's kind of top of the mark investment class aspect for Wall Street. I mean, you've seen a lot of big investments, and a lot of that is really seeing these rental numbers, the dollar numbers, all of that kind of driving in here.
I'll tell you, in 2020, I was really excited. I get the Google Trends newsletter, excuse me, and storage units was one of their trends. And I was like stoked because to me, it was like so mainstream that everyone was searching for that.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about lead conversion rate.
Yeah, lead conversion rate, this is interesting. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. We've seen a big increase in leads. We've seen a large increase in rentals in 2020, but a flattening in 2021. Like I said, a lot to do with inventory and kind of unfulfilled rental demand. But what that's really resulted in is kind of rental conversion rates, stagnating or slight downturn versus other years, but that's more a function of the high lead volume, the high amount of shopping that we were just talking about, and kind of the evening of those rental rates. So when you get your leads going up, when those rentals stay at a kind of a similar velocity, that's going to impact your lead conversion rate. However, we're still seeing maintaining of occupancy rates. We're obviously seeing some seasonality in terms of drops in terms of, at least in my stores and other stores that we've seen a little bit more availability. However, we're still seeing a lot of that demand going on there. And like I talked about, is as long as we're seeing not this mass influx of new construction, Chris Sony, as I had mentioned, he predicted at least another 20 months of strong growth in the storage industry. And, he had actually even predicted, I think it was 8 to 12% rental rate increase across 22. So the forecast is very positive, with really everything in there kind of maximizing, asset value.
That's great news. Okay, so this is a kind of a different stat that we haven't had previously. If you want to talk a little bit about what a callback is, Phil.
Yeah, so this was a feature that we had released into our call center, beginning of 2021. And really what it was, as we saw more calls moving into the call center, as we saw kind of this big spike in volume, I think we talked about like a 23% or about a 20% increase in inbound call volume. A lot of people were turning to call centers, and as that volume increased, we saw, staffing and kind of keeping up with that. How do we hire people? How do we have them work remotely? How do I deal with my service level customers? And so we introduced this feature called Callback. And so the whole idea of
Sorry, I don't know
callback.
what happened. Something just strange happened.
Yeah,
Don't
well,
go to don't ask a question there, or
yeah,
you can.
we're not monitoring questions there, so if you feel free to put them into the Zoom chat. But Holly's just become a
Sorry.
Sheets whiz. So really the whole idea behind this was as these calls are coming in, so we rolled that out to our call center. We ended up seeing about 94,000 callback requests. And the interesting thing was, if somebody's sitting there waiting in queue, and you could sit there and prescribe, make this available for service calls, for existing customers, for delinquent customers, for leads or things like that. And we saw it primarily used in the service side of things. We saw about 98% of those callbacks get completed. And so what that was somebody would go out there and say, hey, call me back when you're available. When an agent comes available and the queue's lightened up, they're able to reach back out and have a conversation of that. And so that was an interesting thing, because we saw good adoption. We saw good use of that callback feature, and really helped kind of keep that service levels up. Because as you talked about, are people going to the website? Are they going to the phone? And that customer service aspect, that ability to talk to somebody, especially when there's a problem, is good. And when your queues are overloaded, that's the time you want to be able to kind of push off those lower priority, or those people who are willing to wait to be serviced.
Is there anything more frustrating than like waiting for an airline for 3 hours? Rather just have them call me back.
Anytime I call anywhere and I end up, I had ordered a treadmill, and I think I was on hold for 20 minutes, and Nordic Track does not have a callback feature. So I had to sit there for 20 minutes. It was not fun.
TJ says in chat, callback is sweet. We see a big use of that feature at Call Here. So thank you, TJ. I'm glad you guys like it. That's awesome. Love to hear the feedback. 20 minutes. You got impatient for 20 minutes.
I mean, it's been longer at times. I think you skipped a few.
I was just going back. Okay. All right. Here we go. All right. I don't know how to make that go away. Sorry,
Jim,
guys.
I've got plenty of patience. I've been friends with you for long enough to know.
Okay. All right. So auto pay enrollment via self-serve. This is just awesome, really awesome to see. So Phil, you want to take it from here?
I mean, this was it was interesting, because 19 to 20, we really kind of expected that big jump. And what this was basically people turning to self-serve. So, going through our collections module, being able to pay through text and email and pay by phone and all that. And it was not only how many payments are we processing, but how many people are saying, you know what, I want to auto pay. And we saw a big jump in 19 to 20. 23%. And it was interesting, because people are going, well, I can't go into the store. I might as well do this. So I don't have to remember. And, didn't really expect to see another 27% added on to that. Because remember, this is same store that we're looking at. So this isn't, the full breadth of our customer base, but taking that same set of stores and going, how did they go across from 19 to 20 to 21, and seeing a 56% increase. So, over 50% more auto pay enrollments than were happening before. Because at least for my stores and for many of our operators, our length of stay is anywhere from 3 to 6 months longer for someone enrolled in auto pay. I mean, I can tell you the number of subscriptions that I have that I continue to pay for just because I got put on auto pay, and I don't realize it until 6 months later when I'm finally looking at my credit card bill. I mean, it's crazy at times.
So do you think that's kind of a genesis of the, contact free is enrolling in auto pay, and people are just used to the convenience of it?
I think there's a combination. You got comfort. So people have become more comfortable with technology. They become more comfortable with kind of interacting in a self-service model. So, it's not just self-service in terms of, walking up to a kiosk or, ordering from a station or something like that. Self-serve is more than that. Self-serve is that ability to interact in any form that I need to. So going to your website and renting, going to your website and paying through text or email or phone. It's that ability to do that, especially right now. And 2021, we've seen a lot more kind of concerted effort to direct into, especially pay by phone, our callers. And so one of our features, our smart routing feature, what it allows you to do is when a call is coming in and we know it's a delinquent customer calling, we automatically route them into a pay by phone. So they never talk to your call center or your store team. And what we found is that redirection lets people that are more comfortable, and the more people there are now that are comfortable to do that, and it alleviates a lot of that pain point, especially with kind of the hiring issues that we're seeing really across the industry and staffing, whether it's due to COVID outages or staffing shortages or various things like that. People are augmenting in different ways. Some of it's technology, some of it's call centers, and this is one of those ways that we're saying, hey, if I can get 56% more people into auto pay, that's a lot fewer people that I have to talk on the phone with, come in my store, or really kind of deal with in the people that I've got on staff.
You've always been such a huge proponent of auto pay, obviously. What are some ways for your self-storage facility that you can get them to enroll when they rent? So you're not ever chasing for rent. You just know they're on auto pay, you're good to go.
So one of the things in my own stores that we do, we have a no late fee guarantee. We've rebranded our auto pay enrollment. So it's, hey, would you, my managers ask, would you like to participate in our no late fee guarantee? And they're like, I would love to have no late fees. And it really is just an auto pay form. And it says, as long as you're enrolled in auto pay with a valid credit card, you don't have to worry about late fees. And so, people end up coming in there and then they sign up for that. And it's kind of a nice little rebranding to that whole thing. But then also in the texts and emails and phone calls, every single one they get allows them to enroll right then and there. And we see a lot of people. And so at least in our own pay by system, when you're going out there and paying, hey, by the way, did you want to enroll in auto pay? Are you sure? And kind of those confirmations really help drive a lot of that enrollment in there.
Nice little checkbox.
Yep. Nice little checkbox.
Okay. This is really interesting too. I'll let you talk about the data first, and then I'll tell you what surprised me the most.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing here is the biggest jump we've seen is in pay by phone. IVR is our pay by phone system, and what we're seeing, and a lot of that is driven not only through the smart route that I talked about, but also kind of that ability for people to self-serve. Now, the email and text did not see the same side of you get the same level of growth as you did in pay by phone. But they saw some growth as well. And so really pay by phone has been the big winner in terms of how people are choosing, which I thought was interesting because people are still, it's one of those, you think, well, they're going to go to my website, they're going to go to text, they're going to go to email, they're going to go to all these other things. And at the end of the day, they're still choosing to call, which really kind of goes back to that kind of growth we saw in inbound call volume as well.
And also, I think it's very interesting because you made the statement earlier that this isn't necessarily the same tenant across. So it's not that they've always called and paid by phone. These are new tenants who are still choosing to use that that channel to make their payments.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
this is a spread of tenants. And now people also aren't choosing just one. So, you'll see in tenants in here, they might hit a pay by phone. They might also hit an email or a text. And then that employee side of it is agent process payments. So they called into the call center and we have a live agent. And so, it's interesting because a lot of people have put a lot of things in to push them away from that people intensive side. So that's one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of growth on the employee side is we've seen customers that put on payment processing fees. So, hey, we'll charge you an extra $4.95 if you want to have an agent process, or I can route you into my pay by phone system and you can do that for free. And so that's one of those kind of cost recovery, but also kind of retraining your customer to use the self-serve options. But hey, if they just want to talk to somebody, great, dial in and we'll handle that through our agents.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Just like the QR codes.
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of just looking at 2021 and the breakdown of the different payment types. Obviously, you can see what Phil was mentioning here. IVR had 37%, text 34%, and email 28%. And still, IVR was up 15% over 2020. Is there anything else you want to add to kind of?
I mean, the crux of this is not really concentrating as much on what the percentages are, as much as when you look at this visually, it's hard to tell which one's in front. And really, if the numbers weren't written there, really what that tells me is there is no one channel you've got to be looking at. You've got to be covering all your channels, and you've got to be kind of, focusing in on those, because at the end of the day, if you're leaving one of those out, you're going to end up, those people are going to, some of them will choose one of the other channels, but many of them are going to choose to go right back to your employee level. They're going to go to what they know, which is the non-self-serve, and that ties up more time, that ties up more people. And so at least within my own operations, the more people we can push down into those levels, the more my in-store teams and call center teams are able to dedicate towards their primary job, which is renting units.
In terms of, I know we have those numbers, I don't think we have a slide for them, but in terms of total volume, what amount of calls are generally payment calls if you don't have something like this in place?
I mean, within a store, your non-lead calls are probably 80% of your calls. So, if you think about it, most of the calls that are coming into a store, now I'm saying non-lead, I didn't say, payment calls. Because you're going to have spam, you're going to have sales, you're going to have all kinds of other things in there. But that's where, predominantly you spend a lot of time, just picking up the phone and talking to people you might already have a relationship with. And those, if you can, the more you can filter off those, the less time you have to dedicate to kind of non-value driven actions by your store teams.
That makes sense. Thought I could stump you there. Next one, maybe. So we have a inbound to call centers. All right. So first off, define what call centers these are.
Yeah. Again, remember, this is inbound calls to call center. So this is same store. So taking that same set of stores and knowing how many calls did we get into a call center in the quarter. So this is Q4. So what we saw is, again, a big jump from 19 to 20. And a lot of that was because of kind of that move to call center based. We had a lot of call centers, not only that launched in 2020 and 2021, but also really ramped up their staffing and ability to handle calls. And so a lot of people have kind of taken that adaptation to go, hey, we're gonna have these calls coming in, we're going to have us be the front line. Some are using it in a rollover, some are using it on a first ring. But the interesting thing is we expected a big jump from 19 to 20 simply because of that pandemic reaction. However, what we've seen is we can see it continued in 21. And a lot of this really kind of paints that picture of, we're seeing kind of a lot of that, how do I centralize? Some of that is, how do I handle staffing? Some of that is how do I handle call volume? How do I handle all of these things that are taking place store level? And then a lot of people have kind of come in and figured out that owning that call center process, owning that phone conversation is so critical to what they do. That's really kind of still continue to be a big thing. So seeing a 52% increase, basically a flattening in 2021, so that overall about a 50% increase overall between pre-COVID and today has been a pretty impressive, not only increase, but also maintenance throughout the year. And in 22, I expect this number to continue to stay strong. Obviously, if we were looking at total numbers, it would continue to grow as we're bringing more and more call centers in place. But just within same store, I expect this to be kind of the new norm to what we're seeing. We're not going back to 2019. People are figuring out, we're seeing more of a move to, whether it's unmanned or hybrid or augmented, if you will, it's what's that going to be? And especially a lot of people figuring out it's a lot easier to train a call center agent on your sales process. To train, a handful of call center agents is much easier than training 50 store managers or 100 store managers or however many you have. And even we've got call centers that have got one agent or three or four, or that might be handling 5, 6, 10 stores. And even they have shifted over and seen those similar kind of uptick in kind of call volumes.
How are you using your internal call center for next door storage to kind of augment your staffing challenges?
Yeah, we're at 19 stores right now, and we launched our call center when we were at 10 stores. And it was one of those where really to us going out to the third party call centers, it didn't really fit our business model. It was one of those, we need to own our process. We need to own our sales channel. And so when we did that, my store teams better understand our product than anybody external to our company is going to be able to understand it. And so what we did is we really looked at our own store, our own call volume, and found about 80% of our calls were coming in the hour before we opened and the hour after we closed. And so by doing some shuffling in terms of moving one store to open an hour earlier and another store to kind of stay open an hour later, it allowed us to get full coverage across that. Now, certainly somebody's calling in at 2 a.m, we're going to miss that call, but in all reality, that's probably a customer. They're going to call back. And what we found is when I sat there and looked at the call volume of those 2 a.m. calls versus the chance of them being a lead versus the conversion rate applied, it was thousands of dollars you'd spend just on the hope of getting that rental. It wasn't worth it. So it was math to me, but that gave us a lot of coverage that we didn't. Call centers are no longer really a call center. Call centers are really, I think of it as distributed communications. It's how do I get the call that's coming in right now to the person that's able to handle that call and get the information along with it to them to handle that call. And so that was easily handled with my own store team.
Okay. Yeah, those are good tips. Speaking of call centers, how about these calls that have rolled over? There's a interesting change there.
Yeah, it rolled over and abandoned. What that means is somebody sat in queue long enough that they rolled a voicemail or the caller hung up. And what we saw was a pretty significant jump in 2019 to 2020. And the interesting thing there was with that jump, a lot of that had to do with people figuring out, they trying to figure out how do I staff this, how do I handle this increased call volume. So they sat there and they said, well, we got all our people. Well, we saw this huge doubling almost of call volume, but they kept their staff levels the same. And so it was one where if we're going to have more call volume coming in, we've got to make sure we're staffed all right, using callbacks, using smart route to pushing off payment calls into the pay by phone. And there was a lot of technology that was kind of put in place to kind of go, hey, how are we going to make it so we can flatten this back out? Because we can't keep up at that level. And so what we did is we saw that drop back in half back to our pre COVID numbers in essence. It was just a little slight over that. But that was one of those things where putting the technology in, putting kind of the staffing in, putting all these different things as people were trying to figure out how to best handle this really made the entire thing run smooth.
What technology changes were made or put in place so you could see, like, because previously that would not have been a visible metric, right? Like you just don't know the calls you aren't able to answer if you don't have a system in place.
Yeah, no, a lot of people didn't necessarily know what they were missing. And so, obviously when you've got a system like CallPotential in place, you're able to see those call volumes or any system, they should be able to tell you how many are coming in, how many are being answered, how many are rolling to somewhere else, how many are going to voicemail and figuring out. And so one of the things that's nice in CallPotential, we just released our new dashboard probably about 6 months ago, but it gives you an idea of, how many agents do you have online? How many calls are coming in every hour? What's your abandonment rate look like? So you get a much cleaner picture of your staffing in real time in a particular day, week, month, whatever that happens to be. So you're making better decisions. So you're not sitting there staffing up for kind of that beginning of the morning. Well, we don't have a lot of volume then. We've got a lot of volume in kind of that 10 to 2 range. And so let's make sure we've got the core of our staff or our shift change is happening during that point. So we've got kind of a doubling within an hour or two of that window.
Magic. Okay, well, that was our year-over-year numbers. So just wanted to kind of present our 2021 standout numbers. We had $311 million collected using Collection Manager this year, which was the most we've ever seen. 2.9 million follow-ups sent through automation. Year-over-year leads entered were up 30%, and the average number collected per location, $86,651. So Phil, if there's anything you want to kind of touch base on here?
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun looking at the numbers collected. Obviously we've brought a lot of customers on into collection managers, into collection manager and all of that. And so it's nice seeing that kind of growth in there. But really the bigger one is down at the bottom, the average dollars collected per location. What we're seeing is that continued kind of expansion in terms of, how are people paying? And, that is $86,000 per store that would have required a person in the past. So those hours, those times, that interaction that would have taken, a typical payment is 5 minutes on the phone. And so every one of those payments that we move into an auto situation or a self-serve situation is less. And this doesn't include those payments that were generated off of auto pay enrollments. So this number is probably 3-4x of this at least, if you count all the auto pays from when they enrolled through CallPotential for auto pay to when they moved out. So it just kind of continues to grow from there. So that was one of the numbers I thought was kind of one of the cooler things to look at.
Absolutely. For the average collected, does it have anything to do with your rental prices being higher, or is it just more
Rental
need?
prices have gone up. And so, I'm sure there's a factor in that, but it wouldn't account for everything. We've seen, I think it was about a 35-40% increase in average per store. And really when you go and look at that versus rents haven't quite seen across the board. We've seen street rents that have changed in similar manners, but not an across the facility revenue increase in many of these.
Thank you. All right, guys. Well, that concludes our presentation for today. If you have any questions, would like to follow up with us, our information is on the screen. You can reach us at that phone number or email address, or hit us up on the website. We've got a chat that you can use to reach our team. Thank you everyone for joining. We really appreciate your time. Phil, is there anything else you want to share with the team?
Just thanks for everybody hopping on, and you guys have a great day and stay warm, and see you at the next one.
Sounds great. Thank you guys.